Middle Podcast, the podcast dedicated to the music, movies, and culture of Generation X.
What is up, slackers, and welcome to another episode of the Stuck in the Middle podcast. I am your host, Jason Eck, and this week is a very, very busy week for me, mostly with work, because a number of events happening over the next few days. So I really was worried that I maybe wasn't going to get the podcast in part because then there's just things that need to be done in the house. Like when all of a sudden it goes from being in the 50s and the 60s up here in New England, a couple of warmer days here and there. And then all of a sudden it's like, oh my gosh, it's in the 80s. I got to tell you, I can't speak for any of you. I can speak for myself and say that when I was growing up, we didn't have air conditioning. Okay. It was just not something we had. I don't recall my grandparents having it, either set of grandparents. I don't know anyone in my family that had air conditioning, much less central air. Like, I think maybe my dad at one point had like a little small window unit, but beyond that, it was ceiling fans, box fans, the exhaust fans. And then when I moved with my mom and my stepdad into our first family home, there was a attic fan, so an attic exhaust fan, which basically sucks all the hot air up to the house, heat rises kind of thing, and just out up into the attic. And it cools down the rest of the house. In my room, because I would have the door closed, obviously at night, I had to have a fan in the window, and that was what we had. I did have a brief stay at a condo complex or an apartment complex where there was air. Actually, you know what? Now that I think about it, that place didn't have it either. Yeah, I just had a fan. Huh, that's true. And then a bunch of, apartments in Boston, and it was, again, window fans, and that was about it. And it was hot in the summer, and that's just how it was. And, admittedly, I think just for myself, particularly younger, I didn't necessarily sleep with a lot of clothes on, so it was not that big of a deal. Then you start having kids, and then it can get kind of weird. Anyway, but my wife and I, we had a couple of AC units in our apartment that we were at for we were there for about 10 years. Great landlords who lived downstairs, sometimes drove me crazy. But anyway, I was the only man in the entire building. So it was a triple decker. So whenever they needed man things done, I would get the call. Yeah. Jason, can you help us with this, please? Yeah, and I would go down and I would help them with whatever. Somehow I got all the snow removal duties. But anyway, I'm completely digressing. So they were very nice. Gloria and Maria, they were our second landlords there. But anyway, we had a couple of window units, and that was about it. So when my wife and I are deciding, hey, we have 2 kids now, and we got approved for a mortgage, and now we need to find a place to live. And we had been looking, and we initially looked at South Shore. So anyone who knows Massachusetts, we were looking at places like, Weymouth and Abington and places like that. And the vibe just didn't gel with us. Like it wasn't the vibe that we were looking for. And it was difficult. And then we were thinking about, okay, we could do like the condo thing, which was, kind of becoming a thing where all these triple deckers were being converted into individual units. And we'd even said to our landlords, because we had been there for so long, hey, would you think about, turning these all into individual units? You could sell each one individually, big money for you. They weren't interested, which sucks because, we did really enjoy living there. It was right across the street from a T station. So Stony Brook T station. Super convenient. And even when we had a car at that point, we could just hop on the train. I can go to work in the train. Not a big deal. So anyway, my wife was looking as well for houses. So she is, kind of cruising around with our daughter, who was an infant, and our oldest son, who was 2. And she saw this listing for a house, and it had this blue door. And for whatever reason, she loved this blue door. Now, that house ended up being both like, it's where my kids grew up, but man, that thing drove me crazy in so many ways because we outgrew it so quickly. But anyway, you don't often find a ranch, a single level ranch with a not quite full furnished basement, more than half, but not a full furnished basement. So let's say a 3/4 finished basement. Vaulted ceilings, aka cathedral ceilings, in both the kitchen and the living room, and central air conditioning, and at the time it wasn't fenced in, but we fenced it in, 1/4 acre yard. It just fell in our laps. Now, mind you, we moved there in 2007. Within less than a year, the market tanked. Actually, you know what? No, we moved there in 2008 because, wait, I'm trying to think when my kids were born. No, so 2007. Yeah, we moved there in 2007. And, we were underwater like in no time. But anyway, we had central air, like right out of the gate. Like it was not the kind of house that you would anticipate having all these amenities. So fast forward, we end up finding this beautiful home that we're in now in 2020. Yes, we moved during the pandemic. That in itself had some of its own challenges. But we needed more space. We wanted a pool. This place has a half basketball court, not quite a whole half basketball court, but enough where it has a 3-point line. You just don't have the full 3-point line. Anyway, and we move here and there's no central air. So in that way, we were quote unquote regressing, right? So window units for everything. And at some point, I'll probably do some mini splits in a couple of areas, or just like these Mr. Cool units that you can get. But now my kids grew up, much of their lives with central air. And we did that purposely as well. We were looking for a place with central air because air quality, because our kids are all asthmatic, particularly when they're little. My oldest had a ton of allergies, still does. And we wanted to have that air quality kind of taken care of. So here I am. I'm planning on recording tonight. I had this busy week and now it's hot and everyone is bitching and moaning. And I'm like, guys, are you serious? Like how entitled you are that we even have air conditioning units, honestly. And the thing is, most of the rooms have ceiling fans, so it's also complete bullshit. Like, they don't really need it, but I was given my directives that, can you please put them in, please put them in, please put them in? And I was like, fine. So I'm getting recorded a little bit later. I had dinner a little bit later. So thankfully, I think that this one is going to go a little bit shorter than I say that, and then I just, spew, as you all know. But I just want to say thank you. Got another 5-star review over on Apple Podcasts. I really do appreciate it. It goes such a long way, and I just want to say thank you. And this is to, I guess it's Celtic Fury 22. I'm a newer listener, just discovered this pod about 6 months ago. I love the different subjects you go over. Thanks for the wonderful nostalgia, Jason. Well, right back at you. Thank you so much for leaving the 5-star review. That's incredibly important, and it really does help. So super appreciative of that. I haven't looked at Spotify in a while, and I don't know if they do it the same way, to be perfectly honest. I feel like they don't. Let's see. Can you go to the page itself? Let's see. Because I really don't know. Hey, this says there are 4 reviews that got... Well, that's cool. About. I have no idea how to look up what people might have said, but I know this. It has 4 reviews. So thank you, whoever is listening over on Spotify. I appreciate it. I have no idea how to look at this stuff. I'm so bad at the analytics. This is why I probably don't grow at the pace that I want to. So I'm sitting with my son yesterday, and he goes, Dad, got an idea for your podcast. I'm going to come on your podcast. I'm like, oh yeah? Yeah. What's your topic? What's the topic that you have? He's like, do you want me to explain the Drake Kendrick beef for you and your listeners? Now, I didn't know where this came out of the blue, but apparently, Tom Hanks, like one of his kids, I think it's Chet Hanks, I think that's his name. He is like a rapper, like conspiracy theorist, like just an interesting cat, very different than his dad and his brother. And he posted this like screenshot of a text thread with Tom Hanks who goes, so can you tell me about this? I don't know. What is that? Is that supposed to be Tom Hanks? There's a snake in my boot. That's all I know. It's just, it's always Woody. Hey, can you tell me about this Drake? And now it's getting old timey radio Barker. Hey, and next up to bat, we've got Big Papi, David Ortiz. And he's like, hey, can you explain this? So he goes in this whole thing, and then his dad's like, oh, that seems like fighting words. So is anyone taking sides? Who's winning? And he's like, did you even read what I wrote? So anyway, it was just interesting that he said that he wanted to do that. But we started talking about the podcast and growth and, you know, kind of going over some of the statistics with him and stuff. He's like, Dad, that's really not bad at all. And I'm like, thank you. I mean, I would like to grow up. And he goes, you got to start doing the shorts, bro. You got to start doing the shorts, and you got to start putting out that content. I'm like, hey, why don't you be my social media manager? He's like, I don't really know the technical piece. I'm like, I didn't say that. Just tell me what I should be doing, and I'd be happy to try to figure it out. Because I have tons of video content, because I record the podcast, both audio and full video, but I just never get around to editing because it's just so much time. Like just tonight when I was getting logged in, my mouse died, and I didn't realize like how much I rely on the mouse until the mouse dies. And it's just a rechargeable, and I didn't recharge it. So anyway, yeah, I got to do more stuff like that. I think some of the shorts would be funny. Like, Dad, you got to get a TikTok before it's gone. I can't imagine myself doing TikTok, but I can imagine myself doing some shorts. So maybe we'll do that. Of course, I still can't figure out why I can't get all of my audio from StreamYard, which I use to record, in stereo when it recorded in stereo for literally like the first year of the podcast. And now it'll like happen once, or I have to do tons of like editing to try to get it split channel, or even doubling it up. And then I get some weird, like, I don't know, not really feedback. It's just kind of this weird sound. So anyway, let's get into tonight. So I mentioned last week that I'd received an email from listener Jimmy, who has emailed the show a couple of times. And, you know, Jimmy does not have to be the only one. Folks, please feel free to send me an email, and you'll see how this gets translated into a topic, which I think will be perhaps interesting. So Jimmy writes, did you happen to see the Bon Jovi documentary? I was a fan like most, from Slippery When Wet through Keep the Faith. I thought the doc was great, if not a little grandiose. What struck me most was the amount of songs I knew post Keep the Faith, after the band completely falling off my radar. I dug through some of their newer back catalog, and whether it's my age or just missing out the first time, he can still write an arena sing-along anthem like no one else. Their 94-95 tour was a 3.5-hour non-stop complete rock show. There's no way anyone left Jones Beach Theater disappointed or without hearing their favorite Bon Jovi song. Would you classify them as hair band that's remained relevant for 40 years, or were they lumped into them and came out the other side? So, a lot to unpack here, and I have my opinions on all of it. So, full disclosure, I haven't finished the documentary. I've gotten through the first 2 episodes. So here's one tiny little spoiler thing that I'm going to share with you about the documentary if you plan on watching it. Well, I don't want to ruin it if you haven't seen it. All I'll say is that it's not quite a cliffhanger. It's a little bit of a cliffhanger, I guess, is really what it is. At the end of episode 1. The end of episode 1, setting the stage for episode 2. And it's just perfect. And it also gives you a glimpse into some of the interpersonal relationships between band members. So I think the first thing to kind of look at is the history of Bon Jovi. And that's really what they were talking about. So I remember them for the first time. I think like many, which was Runaway. And I remember my dad listening to the standard rock radio, not modern rock. It was just like the rock stations. And this song came out and it was a hit with everyone, right? And I do remember at the time that it did sound different than some other things that were on the radio, but it was definitely analogous to a Lover Boy, I think. Just my opinion. Strong vocals, and you got the keys and the guitar kind of all together, right? But the band started in 1983, but John Bon Jovi had already been in multiple bands, but he wasn't satisfied doing covers, which is by and large what they had been doing. And he really was like, guys like, Southside Johnny, right? And guys like Springsteen, they were such influences on him. But he knew that what made them who they were original recordings. And he felt that he needed to learn songcraft. So he joined another band. I forget which one that was. Let's see. Because here's some of his early bands, right? So he started his first band at 13. So 1974. And that's a band called Rays. At 16, he formed Atlantic City Expressway with a guy you might have heard of, Dave Bryan, who keyboard player and, one of the, not a principal songwriter, but a regular contributor to songwriting of Bon Jovi. He played in the band John Bon Jovi and the Wild Ones. Was in a group called Fastlane, and they were basically just openers, or they would just, play their own small gigs. 1980. So think about this. 1980. He had formed his first original band, The Rest, and the band opened for Southside Johnny and the Asbury Dukes, right? But he wasn't where he wanted to be, but he was learning songwriting with The Rest. Like that was the whole key, like wanting to learn how to write songs. And he needed people who had a little bit more experience with actual songwriting. So then he's like, okay, I kind of understand this now. Learning song structure and like chorus, verse, bridge, you know what I mean? Like the structure of songwriting, and really digging in and kind of dissecting what the people that were creating music he was interested in were doing. So 1983, he's got this song, right? And he gets Alec John Such. Is it pronounced Such or Suck? May he rest in peace. Tico Torres, who had been a candidate for Ozzy's band. Dave Bryan, of course. And then Runaway was released without any of those guys recording it, although Dave Bryan did the keyboards. That tin, 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 tin. He wrote that, right? John's like, hey, I got the song. He came up with it, but wasn't on that first recording. So he then needed to put a band together and start writing additional songs because Runaway became a top 40 hit. And that really was the first time I think most of us who can remember back that far had heard of this group, but it really was like, it's John Bon Jovi. It wasn't really the band yet. So that's just like the quick background, right? So Richie comes in, and Richie knew a couple of the guys. I think he knew like Tico or Alec, and they said, hey, come check out the band. And famously, Richie Sambora said, I'm going to be your guitar player, right? And it just turns out that the two of them meeting really was the beginning of what would become a beautiful musical friendship. So here's what I remember. I don't remember the album Bon Jovi, that debut record, but I do remember 7800 Fahrenheit because of a song called In and Out of Love, which had been played regularly on like either Headbangers Ball or one of the shows. Oh, that's right. There was that song She Don't Know Me, which is the only song they've recorded that wasn't one of theirs. That was off of that first record. But 7800 Fahrenheit. All the videos were weird and jokey, and they talk about that a little bit on in the documentary, that they were just kind of going along because they get signed to Mercury Records or Polygram, and they're like, you got to do music videos. So here's where Jimmy's question comes in. So they're going to tour, right? Because the record label's like, you got to tour. So a couple of things happen. One, when they made the music videos, they adopted the style of hard rockers at the time, which was, of course, the hair metal, right? And they certainly looked the part. The bandanas and the chains and the jackets and just all of the look and the earrings, and they did all of that up. And not to mention that you had a wicked lead guitar player. Richie Sambora, savagely underrated as a guitar player, in my opinion. But when they were out doing the tour circuit, like the first time they go to California, who do they open up for? Rat. Now, Rat at that point was huge, right? I mean, what year did, let's see, was it Out of the Cellar, right? Rat discography, Out of the Cellar, 1984. So think about that. 1984, same year that Runaway comes out, and Rat has a triple platinum record. So just for anyone who needs a reminder, Rat, Out of the Cellar, triple platinum, Invasion of Your Privacy, double platinum, Dancing Undercover, platinum, Reach for the Sky, platinum, Detonator, gold. So they were a strong selling band. And I think part of the reason is they had the rat and roll and they had all the sleaziness, but they had killer guitar players in Robin Crosby and Warren DeMartini. The band was good. Steven Tyler, not a great singer per se, but a great frontman. So this is all happening at these formative years of Bon Jovi. Now, when they do 7800 Fahrenheit, they think that they're going to maybe, or this is what John Bon Jovi said, he was hoping they would get to do a tour with someone like the Cars, right? Or Bryan Adams, because he thought that's kind of where they belonged. I couldn't disagree more with John Bon Jovi's assessment of that. I could see them doing opening up for Bryan Adams, but even if they felt that the image that they were portraying was a little bit of playing dress up, I still think they liked kind of having that not persona, but that look, that rock look, and it was clearly working. So I couldn't imagine seeing them on that kind of bill. I don't know. So where were the Cars in 84? What record was out in 84? I'm trying to think of, because I mean, they already had a few records at this point. Let's see here. Yeah, Just What I Needed is 78. Yeah, so this is Heartbeat City, 1984. So Drive and You Might Think, Magic, like what a great period for them as well, where they were really hitting on all cylinders, I think. But I mean, gosh, go back. There's Candy-O with songs like Let's Go. Holy shit, what a good band. I love the Cars, and I know people will say that Aerosmith's the best band that's ever come out of Boston, but no. It is the Cars, without a doubt. Shake It Up in 1981, Since You're Gone, Shake It Up. Oh my gosh, when you just look at, okay, total digression, but this is what I do, right? So I can see why John Bon Jovi was probably listening to a ton of Cars when you think of it just from the perspective of songwriting. So I'm just going to read, some of them I've already read, but think about this lineup of songs. And I never got to see the Cars live. The first concert t-shirt I ever had was a Cars t-shirt that was gifted to me by my Aunt Diana, but Drive, Just What I Needed, You Might Think, Moving in Stereo, Magic, Let's Go, My Best Friend's Girl, Tonight She Comes, Since You're Gone, Shake It Up, You're All I've Got Tonight, Bye Bye Love, Touch and Go, I'm Not the One. I mean, holy cow. I mean, I could keep going, but it's almost like unnecessary. Like, that's all you need to know. Like, what an amazing catalog. And then Rico Kasich goes on to produce artists and is an amazing producer. And obviously the one that comes to mind most readily is that first Weezer record. But anyway, And then I got to meet him, and I mentioned that on another podcast. But so, and I could also imagine John Bon Jovi listening to that, listening to, Bryan Adams. Let's see, at that time. So, I mean, Bryan Adams would have been what, Cuts Like a Knife? I mean, that's like, I'm just trying to picture the lineup. Do you know what I mean? Trying to picture that. So Bryan Adams' first album came out in 1980. Didn't do much on the charts. Canada, it did. You Want It, You Got It, released in 81. That was Canadian gold. So yeah, Cuts Like a Knife was 1983. And that has Straight from the Heart, Cuts Like a Knife, and This Time, right? Straight from the Heart. You know, I liked this era of Bryan Adams, okay? Once we get into everything we do, I Do It For You, I wasn't really into it. So Reckless, Run to You, Somebody, Heaven, Summer of 69, One Night Love Affair, It's Only Love, all 6 singles charted with the top 20 U.S. Billboard Hot 100. So this is clearly, when you think of a song like Summer of 69, I can see John Bon Jovi being like, that's our potential niche, right? But then you kind of go through the catalog, and 7800 Fahrenheit, In and Out of Love, is about the only song that really did anything. Mind you, that album did 800,000 copies, just shy of platinum, in a record that they consider to be their weakest effort, right? Who do they tour with on 7800 Fahrenheit? The Scorpions. And they said that this was the biggest opportunity to learn ever. But their tour mates get weirder, so hold on. So the Scorpions, another band that bridged this kind of weird gap because they could, by image, fit right in with all the bands of the time, the hair bands, because, the Scorpions were prone to, leather and dressing up for the stage, which is awesome, right? So they could do tours with all these different bands and take a lot of bands in support, because the Scorpions were a crazy big band. So where are the Scorpions at this point? Is that Love at First Bite? Is that what it is? Love at First Sting? Or Scorpions? Folks, we're going on a journey tonight. We're going on a journey into sound. Let's see. Scorpions. Wow. They were formed in 1965. Holy cow. So when did their U.S. breakthrough happen? Let's see, shall we? Love at First Sting. That was the one. Rock You Like a Hurricane. Still Loving You. Big City Nights. Whoa, holy cow. I mean, that record, freaking killer. I mean, yeah, it's so good. There's No One Like You is such a killer song. Yeah, I'm just looking at their discography too. No One Like You, which is on their prior record, Blackout, which came out in 1982. That song feels new today if you listen to it, right? There's no one like you. Oh, Klaus Meine. Couple of my bands did Scorpions tunes, and they were never like my favorite band, but holy shit, they're so good. Honestly, they really are. I should go and listen to their whole discography right now. But anyway, so that's the kind of band they went out on tour with. So they're not happy with 7800 Fahrenheit, but they tour everywhere that they possibly can and honing their craft and their skill. Now, in the documentary, they talk about the time frame between they released that first album. They felt a pressure because now they're on a label. We need a next follow-up record. You had a top 40 hit. You had a second minor hit with She Don't Know Me. And we need to get another record in the can and get you back out there ASAP. So they felt as though they rushed the songwriting. They felt that they really rushed it, and it wasn't rooted in the same way that other records, because one of the things they say consistently throughout all of this, which is going to get back to Jimmy's question, by the way, and that is the songs come first, right? It's always about the music, and the image is second. They want to have a big stage show. They want to have a presence. They want someone to notice them when they walk by. But at the same time, they're really focused on the craft of music. So many said that during that 7800 Fahrenheit tour, the band's getting tighter and tighter. John's voice is getting bigger and stronger, and he's able to do the lowest of lows and the highest of highs, but there was still really coming together. So they do this tour. They tour all over the world, Japan, UK, Australia, all throughout Europe, United States. And they said, okay, now we're going to take a little bit of time, and then we're going to craft our record. So they get ready to start writing, and it goes nowhere. They can't figure out what's next, right? So this is where we talk about what is John Bon Jovi listening to. Now, we know he listened to the Cars. We know he listened to Bryan Adams. We know he was inspired by Bruce Springsteen and Aerosmith and AC/DC and all of those bands. But that didn't mean he didn't listen to his peers and his contemporaries. So he was listening to an album by a band that I'll admit never really got into, okay? Never really got into them. But I remember them being plastered in every single metal magazine. I can tell you that much. And that's Black and Blue. Now, Black and Blue is, I think, most well known for the formative members of the band. So Jamie St. James on lead vocals and Tommy Thayer on guitar. Tommy Thayer, of course, has been in Kiss for 20 years now. That blows my mind. And they put out a record. Which record was it? Yeah, it was Without Love. Without Love. And it was produced by this guy called Bruce Fairbairn, right? So John Bon Jovi is listening to the Black and Blue record, and he's like, what am I hearing? Right? And he's like, I can't believe the sound of the recording, like literally the engineering, the production, all the little diddly knob twisting and the musicianship and all of it coalescing. And he was just really taken with the sound of that record. So now I kind of want to listen to it. I don't think I've ever listened to it. Because I don't remember any of my friends ever being into Black and Blue either. So he's like, Richie, guys, like, we have to record with this guy, but we got to get the songs there, right? So he asks for help. So at this point, they're now being managed by a guy named Doc McGee. Doc McGee is also famous for being a manager of Bon Jovi and Motley Crue. And who else did he have? He had a couple of others. Let's see, Doc McGee. Wow. Kiss, Bon Jovi, Motley Crue, Hootie and the Blowfish. He was the guy who worked on the reality TV series Supergroup, which you might recall with just Sebastian Bach being out of his mind. And partners with Gene and Paul on like a number of different things. He was one of the primary architects of that Moscow Music Peace Festival show, which I watched live on pay-per-view, which is insane. But who else? That's right. I forgot about that drug smuggling conviction in 1982. So he has managed Night Flight, 1978 to 1982, Pat Travers, well known, Motley Crue, Bon Jovi, Guns N' Roses, only for 1 year, Kiss, 95 to 2023, Skid Row, 1988, still apparently represents them, The Front, Hootie and the Blowfish, Scorpions, Benice, Gypsy, Nico Vega, Night Ranger 2007 to present, Crooked X, Vintage Trouble, TNT, Drew Davis Band, Down, and Chasin' Crazy, and he has also managed solo artists like Bonnie McKee, Cheyenne Kimball, Darius Rucker, Ted Nugent, Paul Stanley, Bob Schneider, Richie Sambora, Yoshiki, Orianthi, and Mallory Hope. Orianthi and Richie Sambora also had a band together at one point in time. So, back to Doc McGee. They're like, hey, we need some help. So Richie and John are now a songwriting duo for the most part. And they're having difficulty with ideas. And John's like, I think we need help. This record needs to be the record. Like it has to happen. Doc's like, okay, I know a guy. And that guy by the name of Desmond Child. Now, Desmond Child has written with everyone at this point. And again, according to the documentary, he sits down with the guys and they're spitballing ideas and it's going nowhere. And the only things that they had written was Never Say Goodbye and I think Wanted Dead or Alive. Only things they'd written for what would become Slippery When Wet, excuse me. And he's like, so I have ideas, I always have, and I had it on a little piece of paper, and I take it out, and I go, okay, here's an idea. Song title. Imagine just hearing a song title. And he goes, You Give Love a Bad Name. And again, all of this has been on record before. Just the documentary kind of fleshes it out. But these stories have been told before, by the way. And because Desmond has told that story a million times on podcasts. And Richie and John were like, You Give Love a Bad Name. And it was like, it was just that spark that they needed. And they're like, we got this. And John Bon Jovi, Shot Through the Heart, and You're to Blame. You Give Love a Bad Name. So, let's take that question that Jimmy had. So, they're listening to bands like Black and Blue. But they get an offer to do a tour. So, they do Slippery When Wet. They record it. And the record label, as you can imagine, is over the moon. Listen to this. It is hit after hit. By the way, the sound engineer was not Bruce Fairburn, who was the producer. It was some guy by the name of Bob Rock. I don't know if you've heard of him, but I don't know. He's might have done a couple of really huge records like Dr. Feelgood and the Black Album and stuff like that. Anyway, he was the one who was really capturing the sound. And that's when they first heard like a couple of snare hits, getting everything tracked. And they heard what was happening in the studio. And I guess they did all rhythm in like 3 days or something like that. Mind you, this is an album that is legendary. And it was just like boom, boom, boom. It was now hitting on all cylinders. And think about this. 3 top 10 singles off of that record and a certified diamond, right? But they still hadn't broken yet. So this is the old model where, okay, we got a record, it's in the can, it's going to be released, and you got to get on the road. You're going to go on tour. And they were still an opening act. Who are they opening for? This blew my mind. 38 Special. Where are they positioned? So they've opened up for bands like Rat. They've headlined with bands like Stryper in support, right? They've played with the hair bands in LA. They think they're going to tour with somebody like the Cars or Bryan Adams. They open for ZZ Top. They do a whole tour with the Scorpions. They look as though they're every glam band that's in the marketplace at this time. And now they're on tour with 38 Special, which is, country rock, Southern rock, I guess I should say, not country rock, Southern rock. So, of course, they were in a different time period then, but man, they got some great songs, 38 Special. I'm bad with song titles. I just have the one. Anyway, but now the album breaks. And You Give Love a Bad Name comes out. #1 with a bullet. The album goes to number 1, and they are opening for 38 Special. And of course, ticket sales are going up, right? So 38 Special is overjoyed. They have this band that's breaking huge because then people are staying, watching them. 38 Special had a little resurgence for a few years in the 80s. I'm sure some of it is because people were going to see Bon Jovi like, hey, 38 Special's pretty good. They didn't want him to leave the tour, and like, we got to leave the tour. We have to go headline arenas. Now, here's the genius of Doc McGee, by the way. When they recorded the videos for You Give Love a Bad Name and Living on a Prayer, what did it look like? It looked like they were in a huge arena, and it was a huge arena stage because they wanted to give the perception it wasn't any videos with cheesy storylines or anything like that. It was big, huge pyrotechnics, John's flying over the crowd and living on a prayer, right? And they have now just become this juggernaut. Okay, so are they a hair band? Yes. Until 1991. So I would say from 1983 to 1991, less than 10 years, they were a hair band. Because you think about the songs that came out on songs like on albums like New Jersey, right? Their follow-up. What did they open with? Lay Your Hands on Me, right? A lot of their songs are about sex and women and rock and roll. And by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, because somehow he's been anointed as some kind of saint or a voice of the voiceless, good old Bruce Springsteen. I'd like to remind everyone that Bruce Springsteen has a song called Ramrod. And ask yourself, in Born to Run, what does wrap your hands around my engines mean? And what is this fire that he's talking about when he says, I'm on fire? And what do you think he means by, even though we're just dancing in the dark? So, Mr. Boy Scout Bruce Springsteen is a dirty, naughty rocker and sleazy as can be. And this is born out of that kind of, ethos. They're hardworking guys, put all of their heart and soul into music. They mean it sincerely. John Bon Jovi has been with his high school sweetheart for 35 years. So it's no aspersions on like guys being guys, and it's the 80s and they're playing rock and roll and all the spoils that come with it. Okay. And the songs being like that. But they were definitely living that life and the bands that they were touring with. So, for example, Skid Row. Skid Row was one of their opening acts. Trying to think who else. Like I'd have to go through their different tours. So, New Jersey tour. Does it list who the openers were? Let's see. Okay, so we're Bon Jovi, a hair band. Lita Ford, Dan Reed Network, Skid Row, Roxas, Scorpions now open for them, Cinderella, Billy Squier, Sam Kinison. Oh, that's right, the East Rutherford show. They did Giant Stadium, and they did that with Billy Squier, Sam Kinison, a couple others, I think. So anyway, Bad Company. Now, let's see. Bullet Boys. Huh, that's so good. Winger. I guess they did some kind of specialty show. Icon, Johnny Diesel and the Injectors, Noiseworks. This is all in Auckland. And this is their set list in 1989. Lay Your Hands on Me, New Jersey. I'd Die for You. Isn't that off of Slippery and Wet? Wild in the Street, Slippery and Wet, right? You Give Love a Bad Name. Slippery and Wet, Tokyo Road. Born to Be My Baby's off New Jersey. Let It Rock, I think, is off Slippery. I'll Be There for You is on New Jersey. Blood on Blood, Runaway, Living on a Prayer, Living in Sin, Traveling Band, Ride Cowboy Ride, Wanted Dead or Alive, Bad Medicine, Shout, and Never Say Goodbye. I mean, holy cow. Just amazing. But In and Out of Love is not on the set list. Runaway is in the middle. She Don't Know Me is not on this set list. And let's see what else. Do they talk about the tour for? They didn't really mention the Slippery When Wet tour. Does it say anything about the tour? The album has been called the album that turned heavy metal into radio-friendly pop format and is commonly seen as a breakthrough for hair metal. See, it's tough. It's tough because I don't think that you can deny the fact that essentially songs like Let It Rock or Raise Your Hands, you know, I mean, Raise Your Hands is a hair rock tune. I like Without Love. That's a good song. Wild in the Streets. That's a hair band song. And really, if you think about it, You Give Love a Bad Name is more so than Living on a Prayer. Living on a Prayer is its own unique animal, I think. And of course, Wanted Dead or Alive was, in John Bon Jovi's words, their version of Bob Seger's Turning the Page. It's a song about being on the road, because at this point, they'd been road warriors. And let's look at New Jersey from an album perspective. Track listing here. Lay Your Hands on Me. That's a hair rock tune. Bad Medicine's a hair rock tune. Born to Be My Baby is a New Jersey song. Like, that is a New Jersey, like, that's an Asbury Park tune. Living in Sin, Blood on Blood, Homebound Train. I like Homebound Train. That's a good song. Wild as the Wind, Ride Cowboy Ride, Stick to Your Guns, I'll Be There for You, 99 in the Shade, Love for Sale. But here's the thing. I think of bands like Cinderella. Cinderella had a lot of tunes that were just straight out kind of bluesy, piano ballads, like things that weren't necessarily so rigidly genre per se. And you take a look at a band like Poison, and their only number one hit is Every Rose Has Its Thorn, which is clearly a country ballad. So I think that within the context of the time, the era, the image, the songwriting, up through the New Jersey album and tour, absolutely, they were a hair band. So the reason that when you posit the question, were they a hair band that has sustained, or were they something different? Well, they did what some bands tried to do or wanted to do, but couldn't. So they had enough, I think, variety in their base catalog where you saw them going in different directions and likely having different influences than some of the hair bands, who I think were much more readily into Queen, Kiss, Aerosmith, but still rooted in your Zeppelins and your Sabbaths, but also Cheap Trick and like bands like that. Whereas I feel that there's just something unique about this whole coming out of the same place as Southside Johnny and coming out of the same place as Bruce Springsteen that gave a little something different to their songwriting quality, which meant that when they got to keep the faith, they were able to pivot in a way that other bands weren't, while not being grunge or even attempting to be grunge. It was just more straightforward rock and roll, probably more analogous to, Beatles or Stones, if you think about it, with this like Springsteen streak that goes through it. Very much classic rock and roll. And this was followed by their biggest selling and longest charting single, Always, in 1994. So they became a different band. They really did become a different band. And the only other, I think, artist from the time period that you can easily make a comparative to, both in terms of record sales and whether they classify purely as a hair band or their own entity, and I think that's Def Leppard. I would say that Def Leppard and Bon Jovi are very similar bands in the fact that they started one way, and either through necessity, your drummer loses an arm, you probably have to retool where you're going with that, or just a need or desire to expand beyond what you're currently doing. And that's where I think that they both are The reason that they're both stadium level acts, huge touring acts. And here's the thing. Bon Jovi overall has sold more records in total than Def Leppard, but Def Leppard doesn't have just one. They have 2 diamond selling records. Diamond selling records. So here's a quick look. So Bon Jovi, as a band, their discography, you have that first album retroactively became platinum because people went back and bought it, right? At the time, it probably sold like, I don't know, 400,000 copies, not even gold. 7,800 Fahrenheit, 800 at the time of release has now become platinum. Slippery When Wet, diamond, 12 times platinum. But New Jersey, only 7 million, only 7 million. Keep the Faith, 2 million. These days, platinum. Crush, it released in 2000, was back up to double platinum. Bounce in 2002 was gold. Have a Nice Day, I remember when that record came out, 2005, that's a platinum record. Lost Highway, platinum record. The Circle, gold. That's their last gold record in the States. So here's the whole thing. They're also selling in Australia and Austria, Canada, Germany, the UK, multiples of millions. Like Slippery When Wet, 12 times platinum in the US, 6 times platinum in Australia, 10 times platinum in Canada, platinum in Finland, Germany, Netherlands, Spain, like another 3 million in the UK, like massive, right? So then let's take Def Leppard, who have less studio albums, by the way. Their first record, On Through the Night, retroactively became platinum. High and Dry, double platinum. Pyromania, 10 times platinum. Diamond, that's considered diamond. So Pyromania, 10 times, so diamond. Hysteria, platinum. Adrenalize, triple platinum. Slang was gold in the U.S. Euphoria, gold in the U.S. So they didn't have a couple more platinum records, but their 2 biggest releases did as many units, if not more. So, I mean, just Pyromania and Hysteria. And to think everything they went through, 4 years, right? So 83 Pyromania, they huge record, tour everywhere. Drummer loses an arm. They're back in 87 with Hysteria and another monster record. But were they a hair band? I mean, you think about early Def Leppard, they were coming right out of the Mutt Lange, like AC/DC school. That was their vibe. Like that's who they were. And when you even think about like Pyromania, most of it written with Pete Willis still in the band, it was starting to lean into more and more of the pop. But by the time they get Hysteria, with Rick's drumming being different, sensibility somewhat changing, I mean, they toured with all the hair bands, but were they purely a hair band? No. And were they ever really? Not really. They were a part of that kind of new wave of British metal because of when they first got started, 1980, first records out. So Bon Jovi was able to make a seamless transition. So Keep the Faith, still a rock record, still very contemporary sounding, not like searching for a new audience. It's like we should be able to keep our same fans, but we're doing something a little different. Now, mind you, not selling these massive amount of records as they had with a Slippery When Wet or New Jersey, but they were then able to keep it moving as they began to age and move into adult contemporary, but still rooted in rock. So for, I don't know, the first decade of their career, a little bit less, they were, I think, a hair band that wrote really, really good songs and didn't have such a, the keyboards is a big part of it. Like having Dave Bryan and the way that Alec Johnson played bass gave it a little bit different bounce and feel. But I mean, Richie was a shredder. Could just kill it, but by Keep the Faith, they toned down the guitar solos and focused more on song structure and these big anthemic choruses. And that's the whole thing. Like the anthemic nature of the band, I think, has kept them relevant. Now, in terms of seeing them live, I've told this story before. I'll do a brief version, a couple minutes left in the podcast tonight. And I went with my aunt's boyfriend at the time. He probably went and got into trouble. I'm sure there was cocaine involved, and we had to bail on Bon Jovi's set. But what I saw was amazing. So that was on the New Jersey tour. We missed Skid Row, who was opening up at the time, but I got that whole opening, that, lay your hands on me. Amazing. I probably got 3/4 of the set, honestly, before we had to go, but that meant some of the biggest songs I didn't get to see. Anyway, so here's the one other thing that I wanted to say about the documentary. So part of what I talk about on the show, and even some of the things that I know I've been talking about, and it's just a matter of getting final edits done on like this whole fitness thing that I'm doing that I want to share with all of you and some guests that I have in mind. A lot of the documentary is, it's about a man who is coming to terms with mortality and the inability physically to do what he once did in the manner that he expects to do it. And I will say, having seen the band live, knowing what he was able to do vocally live, and that's something that comes up multiple times in the documentary. This guy was doing it full voice, no half-assed, hitting the high notes like they were on the records. He will tell you, Living on a Prayer wrecked his fucking voice. It's a hard song to sing because there's that key change. And man, and a lot of support was offered by Richie vocally. And now Richie's no longer in the band, as many of you probably know, because he could take verses and choruses whenever John needed the kind of handoff. And they do have other people who can sing in the band and do help out. But I think I've never seen a music artist, a performer of his stature, being so laid bare with, I don't know if I can do this the way that I want to be anymore. And that's something we all face, and it's sobering. Cause then you have to ask yourself the question, well, why the hell is someone like Mick Jagger up there still shaking his ass and he's like 80 something years old? And I'm going to tell you my opinion on that. Okay. Mick Jagger always put in, at least in the studio, in my opinion, and in his singing, the least amount of effort possible. What I mean by that is, why just go to show what you can do just because, when you can just do what's comfortable and easily replicatable in the live setting, which is where the Beatles were going to have a hard time unless you had like a 30-piece band to do some of that stuff, right? And Mick always sang within his register and his range, and it was always comfortable. And part of it was he knew how aerobic and continues to be aerobic on stage. And I just felt like he never really pushed himself that far as a singer, just be like, ooh, look at me, I can do some crazy note. Now, I'm not saying that's what John Bon Jovi was doing in the studio. I think all of these songs were legitimately like, oh, I can sing this, without any thought of how you were going to be singing, not 5 years, 10 years, to 30 plus years. I don't think anyone thinks that way. Steven Tyler sure as hell hasn't thought that way. And, you have only so many rounds in the chamber, as they say. And that's what's, I think, so interesting. So a band that in latter era, I think the recordings, from what I've heard, again, it's kept right within a certain vocal range that he's very comfortable with. But anything from Runaway through, New Jersey, some humdingers, to sing, right? Keep the Faith too. Bed of Roses has a killer couple of notes that I can't imagine being easy to replicate live. But yeah, they're an interesting band. I definitely think they had to be counted amongst the hair, but I also applaud them for having the, I guess, flexibility, not flexibility, the ability to morph and evolve and change very organically where it doesn't seem forced. A couple of bands around that time really decided to do kind of a hard left turn because grunge had come out and they felt they needed to match something. And okay, well, we're metal bands. Yeah, we're hair metal. So they kind of leaned into this like Alice in Chains territory or Soundgarden territory. So, okay, tune shit down and now we're angry. You know, they didn't need to do that. Def Leppard didn't need to do that. Motley Crue did. And some people will say that Motley Crue record with John Corabi is their finest work. I never super got into it. I don't know. A couple of songs are good. Hooligans Holiday is pretty badass. There's that one ballad that's pretty good. But yeah, Bon Jovi is a different animal. So think about who really from that era is still going arena level or stadium level. Bon Jovi, Def Leppard, Motley Crue, Poison. Poison does arenas even by themselves, stadiums when they're packaged with Def Leppard and Motley Crue. I mean, guys of that age. I mean, we're not talking about bands like, Scorpions or AC/DC. Guns N' Roses, but they came a little bit later. I mean, Slippery was 86, and Guns was around that time. So Guns N' Roses, but I wouldn't say that Axl has been able to maximize his voice at this period of time, where I guess they're all kind of facing that. Vince doesn't sing words. He just makes the noises, the melodies. If you ever see subtitles, like it's like what's it called? Bad lip reading, but they'll do like bad subtitles for Vince. It's amazing. Amazing. But who's sounding good? Poison, Def Leppard, Bon Jovi. It's really all I can think of. If I'm missing anyone from that era, by all means, let me know. Was anyone else able to survive in the same way? It's really not many. It doesn't mean that a lot of these bands aren't still going strong and touring and making a good living, playing either clubs or small theaters. Great living, playing rock and roll. Just, you got to give them all the credit in the world for doing it. It's who they are. Nobody's doing it at this level. Very, very few. Like I said, just that handful. Yeah, I think Def Leppard is doing, was it Def Leppard Journey this year or Def Leppard Foreigner? Or Def Leppard Foreigner was a couple years ago. This year it's Def Leppard Journey. I think Cheap Trick's on some of the bill. Killer, just absolutely killer. So yeah, that's it. Tonight, John Bon Jovi, Richie Sambora, Dave Bryant, Alec John Such, Tico Torres. I guess a little bit of credit needs to go to, Phil X, who has been in the band for quite some time now. John Shanks, so they're kind of a dual guitar, and then original bass player who had played on Runaway, who was a friend of John's from back in the day. Hugh McDonald has been the bass player after Alec John left. Everett Bradley, who plays percussion, he was added to the band in 2017, does a lot of background vocals and fills in some of those gaps as well. And a little tiny shout out to very early on, like a 2-3 week tour, Dave the Snake Sabo of Skid Row, who was briefly a member of Bon Jovi. So that's it. So like I said, sometimes you listeners are the best source of information for me to come up with a topic, and hopefully you really enjoyed this. Bon Jovi was always going to be a band that I was going to cover at some point. I could dig in even deeper and just go through Slippery When Wet all by itself as a record. I got a lot of feelings about some of those songs personally, things that I experienced during that time. But anyway, tell me what you think. And how can you do that? You can email me at stuckinthemiddlepod@yahoo.com. You can find me on Instagram, X, and YouTube at StuckPodX. Head on over to the Facebook page, Stuck in the Middle, a Gen X podcast. Please like, comment, share, leave 5-star reviews, and most importantly, please subscribe to the podcast. So until next time, later, slackers.